All right, turning now to New York politics. When you head to the polls each November, you might notice that a candidate's name is on multiple party lines. Republicans will often also be on the conservative line, and Democrats will sometimes also run on the Working Families Party line. It's a national party, but it was founded right here in New York in 1998. And since then, progressives have found a home in the WFP. Fast forward to today, and the WFP holds a lot of power in New York, especially among Democrats. So it was no surprise that the party played a big role in this year's elections, organizing around progressive Democrats in key races. For more on that, we caught up this week with Xochitl Nemeka, the state director of the New York Working Families Party. Xochitl, thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate it.
So glad to be on with you, Dan.
So I want to start with last month's elections. You had a really big number last month in the race for governor specifically. So looking at 2018, Andrew Cuomo got about 114,000 votes on the WFP line. This year, Governor Kathy Hochul got 250,000 votes, more than double. Why do you think that is?
Well, we've been proud to hit the ground running with a coalition of Democrats up and down the state to really speak to the values of working families. And this year, with Governor Hochul at the top of our ticket, we also use this opportunity to talk to voters about what mattered most to them: increased housing affordability, investing in public education, take down the climate crisis head on. And we find that when people are connected to the values behind their vote, they're more persuaded to come out and vote. And so that's been our strategy in the past couple of years. We're glad that we're increasing the number of people who vote on the Working Families Party line, whether they're Democrats, working families, or unaffiliated voters. And we look forward to continuing to see those totals get bigger over the years ahead.
You know, at the same time, Republicans did make some ground in some key areas of the state, like Long Island and the lower Hudson Valley, some other areas as well. I'm wondering, because I think your party is probably the furthest away from the Republican ideology, their values. Does that concern you at all, that we see this Republican surge in those areas?
What was clear is that Republicans fought tooth and nail for their votes. They came out organized and quite rabid, honestly, in this political moment, determined to pull people towards their program. Unfortunately, their program was one of fear-mongering without much solutions, but we know that there are real visceral responses that voters do come out, whether it is crime, whether it is rising costs. There are those kind of gut responses that do move voters. And what Democrats need to do, and working families Democrats in particular need to do in response, is put out a vision and a program, right? That if we want to address public safety, people know also viscerally that safe housing and youth programs and accessible transit also address public safety. And so we have to ensure that we're not ceding the ground to fear-mongering and dog whistles that do bring a base out, but that often leave people feeling more cynical, less trustful, and more alienated from their communities.
Yeah, it does feel like there is a sort of divide on messaging between a lot of different parties, a lot of different individuals. I think Republicans did, as you said, a very, very good job campaigning. I think that they did a great job getting to the people who they thought would vote for them, whereas Democrats, I think, took some of their races for granted. I mean, when you look at 2 years from now, when we don't have a race for governor, but we do have a race for president, what does your strategy look like then? How do you get through to these voters, as you were saying, that just don't seem to want to budge on certain issues?
What we feel good about is that Democratic campaigning, thankfully, was not a monolith. And so you see people, for example, like Leah Webb, who is a new state senator joining a coalition of Working Families Democrats from the new seat in the Binghamton, Ithaca area, who really had an organizing first strategy, talking to voters in very different parts of her district with shared messaging about shared values. Sarahana Shrestha, who also just won an assembly seat in the Hudson Valley, did it by doggedly knocking on every single door in her district that also spanned from rural areas to Kingston and places in between. We're going to hit the ground running starting on January 1st, 2023 for those 2024 congressional seats. We have to ensure that we're sending a New York State delegation that has working people's interest front and center. And that means flipping those seats that were lost in the cycle, because the cycle was a fluke. We are sure about it, and we have to do the organizing to ensure that that fluke does not lead into long-term disastrous policies for working people in New York State.
So as we mentioned, the votes for your party just keep going up. So that means that you have more power in elections. It also means that you have more power at the state capitol. As more Democrats get onto your line, as more people recognize that your line exists, what do you want to see lawmakers do with these big wins that your party organized and helped deliver?
I definitely see our power coming from our membership. We are grounded and anchored in the fact that we know that working people share a common agenda, and it's government that has to meet the people where they're at. And so we're hitting the floor in Albany to push for invest in our New York, right? Raising taxes on the wealthy to invest in the common good, to fully fund education and invest in CUNY and SUNY, to address the climate crisis head on through the Build Public Renewables Act and other big climate measures, and to raise the wage for all working people, including home health workers. And so with that broad popular working people's agenda, we want to build the power that reflects what communities want up and down the state and deliver for them in New York, especially in this moment when at the national level, we're assuming Republicans are going to be pretty obstructionist in the House of Representatives. New York has to lead the way.
Do you see the legislature moving more towards the priorities that are aligned with the WFP rather than some of the more establishment positions, especially as you win more races with candidates that I think were more focused on the WFP than being on the Democratic line?
I think the energy has been growing and mounting, and the cries have been louder, right? We've all been saying that the housing crisis must be top on the list because that's what voters are saying, and that really affects people across all lines of difference, geography, race, age. And we're seeing Governor Hochul saying, on day one, we're going to be tackling the housing crisis. We're seeing the call for greater investments. We're recognizing that 2 years after raising taxes on the ultra wealthy, there has not been any of the right-wing talking points about billionaire flight and economic crumble, right? None of those things have happened. And so every year as progress gets made on our agendas become more popular, we see the coalition get bigger and we start to deliver more. And so that's what we're focused on next year, delivering more with and for working people.
All right, well, we will see how it shakes out. Session starts in January. Xochitl Nemeka, the state director of the New York Working Families Party, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Dan. Be well.
And the WFP and other advocacy groups are already rallying around what they're calling the Invest in Our New York campaign ahead of next year's legislative session. It's a package of bills that would enact new tax hikes on wealthy New Yorkers and large corporations and use that money to fund services like education and health care. Carolyn Martinez-Class is with the advocacy group Citizen Action.
These are all things that should be reflected in our budgets. If we treat budgets as moral documents, if we treat them as the state's priorities, then we have to be making investments in our people who have sustained our economy, who have sustained us through the pandemic, and who are now suffering from unequal recovery.
Next year's legislative session is scheduled to start the first week of January.